So hi, my name is Jane Aguilaran. So I am a third year student of AB Political Science or AB Social Science. And now I am going to tell you a speech, or I will giving you a speech with regards about the teenagers. There is a comparison a comparison within the teenagers of today's generations and teenagers way back 80s and 90s. So what is these teenagers? So teenagers, parents and elders are always comparing their childhood of today's teens. The differences seems to vary greatly, but it's there only that much of the change from then and now. And to this generation, it shows that there's a lot of disparities between the everyday lives of modern teenagers and those of a century ago, way back 80s to 90s teenagers. In fact, according to the Philippine statistics, 27% of girls and 36% of boys think their generation won't be better off than their parents. Every teenager, no matter the generation, faces a few of the same changes, from poverty and hormonal changes to societal and parental, financial and educational pressure. All struggles with drinking, smoking, bullying, sex, peer pressure, and a lot more, which is not new to the life of a typical teenager. But we can deny that teenage today are spending their time differently than what teenagers do to a decade ago, in which we can differentiate in a way that today's generation teens tend to perceive and handles a lot of social problem rather than before's era. Teenagers face real concern nowadays, in which they are the one who likely to expose some overwhelming external and internal struggles. A common problem that each teens might be experience, they are prone to this kind of social problem, usually like the stress, bullying, peer pressure, and many more. These such problem pose as a threat to human internal and external life, brought us fear to the people well-being. Many people asking why many teenagers commit deviant act. Why there's a lot of cases of teenager suicides comparing before. I believe that everyone know the concept of suicide is such as how rampant this crime on our society nowadays. I highly believe that every one of us are commonly experience stress and problems. This kind of problems maybe somehow lead to such depression that mostly affected to it are teenagers who struggling with lots of problems lead to commit crimes and suicide. Teenage people is prone to get more internal and external struggle in life, to school, family, peer problems, and so on, that make them become stressed, and the more they feel this, the possible depression may be arise, which fear most peoples today. Because depression is not a joke, it is very concerning that suicide rate was rapidly increased from this time to time to situation where teens commit deviant act or crime at their young age. When teenager emerge, the characteristic may somehow different as she discover their personality and begins to affirm their ego. As time goes by, the more they grow, the more characteristic toward themselves may change. In fact, teenager is like a chick, just breaking the shell in which she has been confined, like a new type of version of themselves as the new stage of life. For example, if the parents say, "We are going to visit Aunt Jane today," the child has to go. But some of the teens may put up an argument by refusing because somehow her characteristic change from outgoing to not going to his or her families, such as they like more to be alone in a group in a anonymous group. Also, mostly themselves, the only world in which they feel at home is where their fellow teenagers. Hence, they have language of their own and only in their own milieu. Though they feel they are understand, however, many of people, especially the parents and elders, are always tend to compare the differences of teenage before and then, which people views on them differently. Teenagers of modern time are different creatures than teens of the past. Technology has taken over their lives. It is mainly because of the environment they are in and the power of strength of media and peer influence. The differences between teens in the 80s and 90s and the teens now are not as great. Many people claim that youth nowadays are more worse or lack morality, but the truth is that today's teenagers are largely unchanged from those of the past. Teenagers have always enjoyed hanging out with their pals, parsi- participating in thrilling and daring activities, and pursuing their curiosities. Social media just increased the visibility and awareness of the things that teens do today. The teenagers partied and used drugs throughout the 80s and 90s, but social media didn't exist at that time by posting about it, unlike now. Also, we can't deny the fact that teenagers in this modern world is prone in such social problem, such as, for example, cyberbullying, in which people tend to use the means of technology to bully others, that somehow it tend to have a big effect towards the teen itself in a way that as they can feel this kind of problem, there's a possibility that they become stressed and more likely to become depressed, that lead to such bad act. Although social problem is not far from the reality way back 80s to year 90s, but in today's modern world, lots of problems arouse which brought a big effect towards the individual, especially the teens. Therefore, I can say that teenager in this modern world is different from teens before in such many ways, from behavior, characteristics, and social problem that they deal with. It shows that how social change might change themselves, how simply they develop their characters in different way, how often how often change their mood, at the same time how they easily influence the world's technology, and mostly how the certain things at their young age do a lot of stuff. We can't deny the fact that an ager is characterized as being imitativeness and less restlessness in many ways, in the sense that today's teenage are born into a different era that revolves and emerge from it. Newly attitude. In fact, during the teenage period, the teenagers don't have a fixed thought. They think differently than the oldest in age. It may be that teenagers in the same age have the same thoughts about life. It's a difficult period of a lifetime in which they can easily influence others, especially nowadays, which lots of teens have been influenced to some bad acts. Social issues are problems that affect large group of people and can affect how well a society functions. Teen can face social problems just like adults can. They may be more susceptible to these categories because their brains are still developing and their bodies are changing quickly. Social issues, what we might think of as teenage problem, can affect emotional and physical health. In some way, a teenager is a hardest chapter in life. This is the part where Teens trying to define who they are not only to everyone around them but also to themselves. Teenager with image, gender, identity, self-confidence, and tons of emotional issues. It is imperative to remember that today's generations are vulnerable of a numbers of temptations. For example, family and peer pressure is one of the reasons why teens nowadays experiencing stress and depression. That's why many of them tend to use drinking alcohol and worstly drugs to keep themselves keep from their own problem. They are susceptible for such challenges, but it is from them on how they are going to deal with it. Before I end this speech, some people thinking of a teenager and describe them as awkward, hormonal, rebellious, identity seeking, lost, impulsive, or lazy. This may all be true to some teens or not true at all to other teens. I hope this will help as a reminder to us, especially to teenager out there, to not to be hard within yourself. Thank you.